Hi everyone. Don't freak out. We're in a new place. Long story short, YouTube, my paycheck's in half. The pandemic caused CPM to drop. It's been a mess. So I've moved in with my parents. My wife and I are here now, and we'll make do of this until we can get enough savings to get out. But luckily we had some little bit of helpers here. First Force Figures sent this lovely free Luigi figure here, because they're freaking amazing and want to make a nice little place for us. And not to mention, we have a lovely sponsor, ExpressVPN. Have you ever heard of ExpressVPN? Of course you have. Everyone talks about how it's like an envelope that covers your postcard, so it protects your personal information. But here's the thing, I'm not going to a coffee shop and going on public Wi-Fi to do my banking, so right now, security isn't really on the top of my mind. But here's the thing, it can get you into any country. No longer are you going to be blocked and told that you can't watch Japanese Netflix. You can. I'm gonna go to Docklands in the UK. So now I can go to Netflix, and now that I'm attached to the UK, I can actually watch Your Name, the hit movie Kimi no Na wa, something that is not available in my country, and now I can binge watch the movie for the 1500th time. And that's not all you can do. I have ExpressVPN on my phone. I've literally used a VPN probably every single day for the past 2 years because I love line messaging, and they block so many of the features in America, but now I can get all the stickers that I want no matter what country I'm in, and it's freaking great. So if you're interested in ExpressVPN, just go get 3 months free at expressvpn.com/Beta64. That is the link you want to go to. It is in the description. And now, on to the episode.
So nice.
Here we go!
I think New Super Mario Bros. For the DS is one of the best Mario games that Nintendo has ever made. And for those of you who are still here with us, hi, hello. So today I'm talking about the development and unused findings in New Super Mario Bros. For the DS. It's a game that I personally actually really enjoyed. I got a copy of the game from a friend years ago. He just gave it to me for free because he's freaking nice and awesome. I don't remember his name. I don't know where the copy of the game is now. I'm sorry, I failed you. So to help ease my sense of guilt, I decided today is the day to talk about the game's scrap multiplayer mode, its 5 unused stages, and its secret screening that we don't have any footage of even today, but we do have an account of what went on beyond those doors. And today, I think it'll be fun to talk about the development of New Super Mario Bros. For the DS.
Sadly, we don't know exactly when New Super Mario Bros. Began its development, but we can estimate a time frame for it. Before this game launched the whole New Super Mario Bros. Line of games, there was a different series of Mario games that fans enjoyed, myself included. The Super Mario Advance series, which if you don't know what those are, understandable, they did release like 15 years ago. Basically, the Mario Advance series was just a bunch of Game Boy Advance remakes of Mario 2, Mario 3, Mario World, and Yoshi's Island, the last of which was released in the latter half of 2003. Sometime after that, but before May of 2004, that's when development began on New Super Mario Bros. It was designed as a spiritual successor to the Super Mario Advance series, though this time, instead of it being a remake, it was going to be an original game, which would be the first time in well over a decade that a new original side-scrolling Mario platformer would grace store shelves, the last of which was Super Mario Land 2 that was released in 1992, which is seriously a good game, go check that out. Now, the reason I said that New Super Mario Bros. Development must have began before May of 2004 is because that was when we got our first ever footage of the game, which means this early footage we're about to look at is from at most 9 months of development, very likely less than that, and it shows. This footage comes to us thanks to a disc given out to the press at E3 2004. This footage in particular is called New Super Mario Bros. Movie. So at this point the name was already finalized. It's amazing how it looks so similar and yet so different from the final build of the game. The biggest thing that stands out to me at first are the sprites, which look like they would have been more at home in Yoshi's Island than New Super Mario Bros. Not saying that's a bad thing, I'd love me some Yoshi's Island, but it's just a little out of place. Something I will say is bad though, is the gameplay. My goodness, it's rough, and it's very obviously a very early prototype of the game. Glitches are everywhere, sometimes coins just don't collect, sometimes question mark blocks don't function, and the audio of the first half of the gameplay is off by a good half second from the action. There's no music, just rough placeholder sound effects, some of which are lifted right from Mario 64. This build also happens to be using 3D models for enemies, which is actually not the same as the final, because Goombas and Koopas are actually 2D sprites designed to look like they're in 3D. And you can see this very well when playing the game on higher graphical settings. See how Mario's all nice and smooth, but this Koopa? Yeah, it's still crusty because we're only upscaling 3D models. This footage also shows off the gimmick of the game, the Mega Mushroom, which looks very different from the final because it's literally just the Super Mushroom from Mario 64 DS, just tinted blue. Which is interesting because they both function relatively the same in their own respective games. And not only that, these early shrooms could have originally been picked up by enemies like this Goomba here, who does appear in the final game as a boss, but instead of collecting a mushroom, he just grows big on its own, much like Mario does in this early footage. He can also dash in this mega form, something impossible in the final game, along with some other impossible moves like this jump, and oh my gosh, he just killed Bowser. I guess the game's over. I mean, that is the end of the footage. Or is it? Apparently, this isn't all of the footage that was shown to the press, this is a cut-up version of it, at least according to a preview article of the game written by Nintendo World Report around E3 2004. At the end of this preview article, its writer Chris mentions watching a short gameplay clip, starting with Fireball Mario taking out Goombas, breaking blocks, collecting coins, same as the footage we just saw. Except after that, he mentions that Mario goes down a pipe, something that we don't see here. And then he says that it switches to Mario growing to gigantic proportions, running over enemies, and even Bowser, something that we've of course seen. For us, that's where the footage ends, but not for what Chris got to see, that lucky dog. Our cut of the footage removes something very interesting. Bowser was apparently shown running through a level after that, as if controlled by the player, and then jumping on top of a flagpole at the end, beating the level.
Why did they cut out that part? That sounds freaking awesome. I looked around for uncut footage or screenshots or anything at all, and I came up empty-handed. Looks like we're just gonna have to take Nintendo World Report's word for it. Something I don't really like to do with videos since, you know, it is just one source and they could be wrong, so let's just take it with a grain of salt.
Around that same time, there were also some screenshots that Nintendo included with their E3 2004 press release, showing high-quality captures of places that we've already seen in the early footage, but it included the bottom screen, showing a placeholder logo with mushrooms moving all around under it. And that's pretty much it until E3 2005.
Yeah, you heard that right. A whole year with no new info. But luckily, at E3 2005, we got a lot. At the event, we got the coveted show floor demo as well as a new trailer for the game. And here's the thing, this demo showed up in a lot more places than just E3. So even though some of the footage may not be from E3, it was the same E3 demo. So let's just take a look at this, shall we? Golly, that's a lot of salt.
This demo starts out with a nice early logo for the game that looks almost nothing like the final version. Now, if that happens to be a bit too crusty for your taste, no worries, because this logo was also given out in higher quality thanks to Nintendo's E3 press kit. And it's also still in the final game's files, unused of course, so we can see it there too. But now let's check out an actual level, each of which starts out with some removed text that says Mario Start, which believe it or not actually shows up in the game's files too, along with Luigi Start, but we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Let's see what differences some actual gameplay in the demo shows, and you can thank the Beta Compare Club for helping look through all that gameplay footage. Seriously, you guys are the best. Okay, so the first level that we're gonna look at features a ton of moving mushroom platforms and blasting cannon pipes, in a style that looks to be a mixture of the grasslands and jungle levels in the final game, though this level isn't in the retail version of the game, so there's really not a whole lot we can compare with. Luckily, there are a few general differences in here to take note of, like a lighter block color when hitting the question mark block, a more rectangular mushroom platform, more realistic clouds in that wooden background, and when Mario collects a mushroom, he isn't frozen in place, he can still move around in this build. Also, rewind. There is a blue ring here, which is actually very important, so we need to look at that. In the final version of New Super Mario Bros., when hitting a red ring, it disappears, and a bunch of red coins show up, and if you happen to collect them all, you get this nice little gift. But in this version of the game, that ring has nothing to do with red coins. Instead, it acts as a checkpoint, being blue at first and then turns red when hit by Mario. This early ring and the final version happen to be one and the same. In fact, that object is known as OBJ E3 ring in the game's files and comes with 4 states. The blue inactive state, the red state for Mario, which was used, the green state, which may have been for Luigi if he got the checkpoint, and then a red-green state. Out of all of them, only the red is used. And as for the red-green state, well, we'll get back to that a little bit later. There also happens to be a desert level in the E3 demo that was completely scrapped later on, so there really isn't much to compare here. The thing is though, this is the only E3 stage that still exists in the game's files, and it's even playable, after a lot of work from clever modders like Tricky and Tanks who managed to piece it back together. Thank you both, looks very, very nice. Next up is the castle level, which not even 4 seconds in, we've already got footage of a removed object, a red question mark switch from Mario 64. It was replaced with 2D switches in the final game, and this 3D model, which is still in the game's files, was scrapped and left unused. The switch's function in the demo, causing blocks to fall, wasn't removed though. It still happens in the final game, but just in ghost houses, so it is a bit strange to see it in a castle. Speaking of which, what castle even is this? Well, the whole beginning part is kind of its own thing, but after going through the scrapped doorway, meeting with some womps, sliding down early pole, passing by a rotating question mark block, and rotating exclamation point box, going through another door, we finally get to something familiar. In fact, it looks almost identical in layout to World 4's castle. Like, check out this whole jumping section, it's pretty much exactly the same except for some visual changes, like blue platforms originally being orange, along with a different background behind it. After that though, everything is different again, though it does eventually end up taking us to the World 4 boss, Big Goomba. Though instead of platforms lifting off the ground like in the final battle, this version has a switch that you press to make 3 platforms come out of each wall. Other than that, the battle's pretty much the same, just ground pound to hit the dude, though it's not quite as satisfying without those cool effects they added later on. I should mention that this room the battle takes place in is of course different looking because of the tile set, and it turns out that unused tile set is still in the retail build of the game, unused of course, with X's all over it to mark it as,
Don't you dare use this.
After Mr. Goomba here is defeated, he poofs into a bunch of smoke, unlike the final game which shoots out way more light than smoke. And then after collecting the key, instead of the camera keeping a reasonable distance from Mario, letting him have his moment, it zooms all the way in, saying Mario clear, which doesn't normally happen in castle levels. Not to mention, that's a different victory animation, that's actually still in the game's files. Now, the last level we have in this particular footage of the demo shows off the Mega Mushroom, which in this build required you to hit the block it's hiding in multiple times to get it out. It also was nice enough not to move, so that way you'd have plenty of time to collect it, and in case it wasn't obvious already, it looks way different. Like, goodness, it's huge. Jeez Louise. Also, it seems like the giant Goomba that we fought earlier wasn't just going to be a boss, it also appeared outside of the castle here. Not for very long though, because Mario just freaking punts it. Something that he can't do in the final game. Now, they did stop Mario from dashing in Mega Mario form, so that's normal now, and in the end, of course, Mario reaches the flagpole. A very, very basic flagpole.
So that was the demo that Mario fans got to play back in mid-2005, but we also got graced with a trailer that showed off way more of the game, a bunch of new stages, as well as a look at its multiplayer mode. Now, I'm not talking about the finals Mario vs. Luigi mode. I actually never got to play that personally. I didn't have any friends who owned the game, or friends, but I have seen footage of it. I know that it's just the brothers fighting to see who can collect the most big stars, but that's not the way it was originally going to be.
As you can see very well in this trailer, originally some of the game's main story mode stages would have been able to be played side by side with another player. That's where this red and green ring comes into play. You know how when Mario hits the ring it turns red? Well, it looks like when Luigi hit the ring it may have turned green, which means that if both of the brothers hit the ring one after another, it would have likely turned into this red-green state. Technically, according to an interview with Takashi Tezuka though, the game's general producer, these were still going to be dedicated Mario vs. Luigi stages, but instead of them being small, looping, collect the star stages, they were going to be normal ones, meant to see which brother can reach the flagpole or the boss first. Tezuka wanted to make sure people knew this. This was an entirely optional, competitive mode, and New Super Mario Bros. Was still meant to be a primarily single-player game. There was also some plans to help spice up that multiplayer mode too, with exclusive items like a lightning bolt that could shrink other players, much like in Mario Kart. Sadly, we don't have any gameplay of that, but we do have a sprite of the item left over in the game's files, though sadly it's not functional at all. We can talk about unused stuff later though. Instead, let's see what differences we can find in this E3 trailer, starting with the bottom screen. Well, when comparing the two side by side, you can see that there are quite a few differences. The progress bar is on the top of the screen with a flagpole at the end instead of a castle, as well as some text describing the level. And below that are the lives, coins, time, and the score, all of which use a font that's very similar to the one used in Super Mario 64 and happens to be unused in the final game. Below that is the item reserve, which originally allowed the player to hold 3 items instead of just 1. And also, do you notice something missing? Yeah, there's no place for star coins, like at all. In fact, throughout all of the footage we've seen of this build of the game, there are no star coins to be found. So it looks like at this point those big collectibles had yet to be added yet, meaning that the only thing to collect here are just the normal coins. And of course, since these main story stages could have been played with 2 players, Luigi is also here on the bottom screen. Now, about these stages, you're probably wondering if there's anything different in them. And oh yes, there is a lot of differences here. Like how you could have originally downed a large dry bones with a single bounce rather than a ground pound. Plus, there's no UI on the top screen, like at all. And the lava here in this trailer is only in this pit, instead of spreading across the entire bottom of the stage. Turns out this early lava is still in the final game, but as you can guess, it goes unused. There's also more general changes to be found in this early build, like with the Superstar, which in the final game makes the players shine with this neat rainbow effect and a trail of sparkles falling behind them, which is nice. But in this trailer, even though it does have the sparkles, the rainbow effect is so hard to see it's practically invisible. This other footage from the same demo is high enough quality to actually see it, but it's still so much more subdued, and I'll tell you why. In the final game, when Mario collects a Superstar, his outfit changes to white, and then a rainbow effect is added on top of that. But in this build of the game, it keeps the same outfit, so even though the rainbow effect is still there, it's really hard to make out. Also, touching an enemy while invincible gives you a coin, which doesn't happen in the final, and speaking of something else that doesn't happen in the final game, both Mario and Luigi can punch in this build using the R button while in Super, Fire, or Mega forms. You can see this super clearly in this screenshot given out around E3 time, which includes a spin drift ripped directly from Mario 64 DS. Also, much like Mario 64, the brothers could also kick too, so long as they're in the air. But that's not all, folks. This E3 trailer gives us a look at some new environments that the demo didn't have, or at least that we didn't have footage of. Like this underground section, which looks quite a bit different in design, and even has some regular yellow blocks here, something that never appears in the final game, as the blocks underground are changed to blue. We've also got an underwater stage too, but only being played in single player mode. This background happens to be much more basic. And also take a look at this Cheep Cheep's eyes. They look to just be textures on a flat plane in this build instead of nice, rounded eyes that the finals has. Also, the sushi sharks had the ability to turn around in this build, which it actually can do in the final game, but only if you enable an unused functionality it has. Now, besides the regular overworld, which we've already taken a good look at, we've also got some desert stages, which in the trailer features a tornado that in the retail build only appears in World 6-A, which is weird, because World 6-A is a mountain stage, not a desert one like this early version.
Now there is one more thing I want to talk about in this trailer, and it's the music track, which is actually an earlier, slower version of the Mario vs. Luigi theme in the final game. And not to mention, this early version of the song is still unused in the game's files, or at least a track very similar to it. It does have a little bit of extra oof and flair in there, which is basically just instruments for the enemies to dance to. Take a listen. Now after E3 with its nice little trailer and playable demo, we got to see nothing. Nintendo went silent. Not a whole year's worth, but it was several months before we heard anything new about New Super Mario Bros. And the people that broke the silence was Famitsu. You know, the famous Japanese gaming magazine that rated Nintendogs a perfect score, and Donkey Kong Country, it got a 31 out of 40. Like, what the frig?
In Famitsu's first article for New Super Mario Bros., which was published towards the end of 2005, we got a nice look at an early volcano level, whose tileset and background, or at least one similar to it, is still in the game's files, just, unused. There's also an early version of Stage 6-1 shown off too, but for some reason it has a volcano background, meaning that perhaps World 6 was going to be a volcano world at first, or maybe this level was actually going to be for World 4 or 8. Or there's a chance that the volcano background is just a placeholder for the mountain background. We just don't know for sure. What we do know for sure, though, is this next screenshot from the same issue is an early version of World 8-2's Mini Mario bonus room. It's more or less the same layout, but the colors here are completely different on pretty much every single tile. We've also got a couple of underwater screenshots here too, the first of which is from 3-1 with a different background from what we saw at E3 2005, but still not like the final game. Other than that, there's not that much to see here, except for the fact that this Cheep Cheep looks to be moving upwards, something impossible for a Cheep Cheep to do, though deep Cheeps can. The other screenshot we have is from 8-3, which it doesn't really look quite like. The only reason I say that it might be an early 8-3 is because it's the only level in the game with a Mega Unagi that chases you. This could technically be an entirely different level that was also going to have a chase sequence, but we don't know for sure. A few months later, on May 13th, 2006, we got another Famitsu article with a lot more screenshots of the game. But before that, I want to talk a bit about the Nintendo DS conference that happened on February 15th, 2006. There isn't much here in terms of new Super Mario Bros. Content, except for a single blurry screenshot. And it turns out there's quite a bit of changes in this alone, especially with the UI. Like how on the top screen, the time and coin counter are finally here, but put in the center instead of on the corners. The bottom screen also seems to be a bit closer to the final version, now with just a single item reserve and a place for star coins, but there's no ring around the item, and the lives were put below the score instead of on the top right. The level shown on the top screen is labeled as stage 1-1, but this area isn't in that stage. Not to mention the halfway point is much further to the left, and also, why is it being shown if Mario hasn't actually reached that point? Maybe that was the way it was originally going to be. Maybe you would have always known where the halfway point was, but they got rid of that. Okay, let's head back to March and take a look at some higher quality stuff from the second Famitsu article I mentioned earlier. A lot of stuff here is starting to closely resemble the final game with just a few key differences, like with World 2-2, which is finally using the final desert background, just the wrong one. Instead of using the one with the blue sky as the final 2-2 uses, it instead is using the yellow one that 2-3 uses. Not to mention it's also using the tile set normally found in mushroom levels for whatever reason. Other stages have tile set differences too, like this screenshot of 1-2, which has an early version of the underground tile set, with the top of the screen covered in those tiles without any gap up top, so forget about running over the entire level. It probably wasn't going to be possible here. Now for 2-4, that one is quite interesting, because obviously in the final game it's set in the desert, seeing as World 2 is a desert world. But in this screenshot, despite it being the same exact layout, it's set in the grasslands, meaning this level could have originally been in World 1, or for some reason, maybe World 2 just so happened to have a grassland level thrown in the mix. We may have an answer to this question though. A Japanese magazine known as Nintendo Dream showed off their own screenshots for the game, which actually helps us figure out why stage 2-4 has grass in it, even though it's a desert world. And the reason is because this used to be an oasis stage, much like 2-2. Which explains the grass, though it doesn't really explain the grassland background or why the tile set is also from the grasslands. You know, it's still a mystery, but I'm gonna guess that it was probably placeholder stuff. Other stages that Nintendo Dream showed off also happen to have some strange backgrounds too, like this shot of 3-B, which takes place in the sky in the final with all these fancy colored pipes, but this early version just has green pipes and it's on a desert background no less. So maybe this was just planned as another bonus level for World 2. World 8-4 also has a different background and tile set. Instead of a harsh, mountainous World 8 look, it was originally going to have the same style as levels in World 4, which actually makes a lot of sense. Scuttlebug enemies only appear in World 4-1 and 8-4, which seemed odd to me, since they fit so well in World 4, yet there's only one stage in that world with them in it. Well, it looks like that wasn't the case originally. Turns out 8-4 was likely going to be the second stage in World 4 to have those enemies. At least, that's what the screenshot suggests.
At this point, E3 2006 rolled around again and we got a new trailer of New Super Mario Bros. And another playable demo. But they were pretty much just of the final game at this point, there wasn't really much to compare here. But by some strange turn of events, Nintendo sent out some screenshots, of course, with E3's presentation, and those are from an earlier build of the game than the trailer and the show floor demo. So we have some stuff to compare here. Granted though, it's not that much earlier, but there is still some interesting stuff to look at, so let's begin.
First off, let's take a look at World 1's overworld, which shows off a different colored Toad House over here, a missing star coin tracker underneath the stage number, and the star coin counter was moved to a completely different corner too. On the bottom screen of the same screenshot, we also get a nice world map along with icons of the other worlds too, connected by solid blue lines in this early version, instead of gray lines connecting the main worlds and dotted lines connecting the secret ones. We also got to look at World 4's spooky ghost house, which on the bottom of the screen for some reason or another has a progress bar, something removed from final ghost houses since those stages just aren't linear enough to warrant one of those bars. It just wouldn't work very well. I mean, it doesn't look like it's working here anyway, seeing as Mario's well into the place, but the icon on the bottom of the screen still shows him at the very beginning. There are other strange oddities on bottom screens of other screenshots too, like Mario facing Bowser, but with a 0 score. I mean, it says Mario's collected 25 coins, so that means there had to have been at least like 2,500 score. Something fishy's going on. Either these screenshots were taken of a debug build or something was photoshopped. Well, there's still more that we can see, like how star coins originally had black eyes, how the flagpole looks just a bit different, or how this build still uses the skull from previous versions of the game that we've looked at.
You know, it's a really good way to transition to unused stuff. So let's talk about some unused text first. There's a couple of interesting things here, like how there are 2 possible internal names for New Super Mario Bros. The first one is MJ, which appears in the build data of the game and in New Super Mario Bros. Wii's save file. I don't know exactly what it means. Maybe Mario jumps? The other possible name is Mario 2D, which appears twice in the game's ARM9 binary, and that's interesting and all, but what about internal names for objects in the game that reveal little-known secrets about them? For instance,
big stars in the Mario vs. Luigi mode are called L-Star Red NCG, meaning that at first they were probably red, or perhaps even colored red and green for each brother specifically, though that's just speculation. And also, speaking of stars, the sound effect for collecting a star coin is actually called SEOBJ Get Dragon Coin, which could mean that Mario was originally going to collect dragon coins from Super Mario World instead of star coins. Not only that, but also the sound effect for spiked balls refers to them as big rocks instead, and those, like, snail-acorn things? Yeah, they're called donketsu in the game's files, which translates to bully, like the ones from Mario 64, meaning that's what they may have originally been, not a weird unicorn snail hybrid thing.
And that's all the interesting unused text, but don't worry, there's a plenty of more different things to find in here. For example, you know with the DS, if you try to connect locally or even online, you'll get this bar to appear on the screen, right? Well, in New Super Mario Bros., if you go into a level or just in the overworld and try to connect to a router for internet access, you will be able to find this bar in very specific places in the game, almost like it was planned to be there. And of course it was, because there was local multiplayer in the game's main story. This was just a remnant of a past scrap feature that was left in the game. What the frick, Nintendo? That was such a cool idea. Why would you remove it?
Now, as you can probably expect, since early builds of New Super Mario Bros. Took so many things from Mario 64 DS, there are, of course, plenty of leftovers from the game. Like this 3D Koopa model, which was originally used in the earliest builds of the game before they made them into 2D sprites. We've also got the swinging platforms from Rainbow Ride, 2 exclamation mark switches, a treasure chest from Jolly Roger Bay, and the stairs from the Bowser stages. We've also got some transition graphics too, featuring Wario, Yoshi, and a star. Now there are some unused graphics in the game that aren't just leftovers, like a purple question mark block, a 2D hand that was replaced by the 3D ones in the final game, as well as this texture, which when attached to Mario's model shows what may have been a scrapped power-up from the game. I mean, it's with all the other power-ups, so it probably was, but I'm not gonna say I'm for sure because I could be wrong and I can't have this happen again.
About that Cheese Nips sponsorship, the executives at Nabisco are not in a position for our time to be wasted. And in your 2012 video on Luigi's Mansion, you've said that the scrapped game over happened when the clock reached 1:30 a.m. It was obviously just for the trailer. I can't believe you would think that's okay.
There are plenty more unused graphics in this game. The next ones we'll see are actually found in the game as tiles, which means some of them have properties included with the sprite. For the ghost house, we've got this doorway and a surprisingly cute Boo statue who's trying his darndest to be mad, but it's just too cute. For castles, we also have this pillar that Mario can just walk past, as well as an ice block that isn't slippery. It's just a block. Also, check out this scrap door. Even though this looks very similar to the final boss door, it's in the tower tile set. So it's possible that this was meant as a generic boss door at some point before they decided to save that cool red color for the end. Next, we've got this water tile that definitely appears to be a placeholder thing, because there is no animation. It's just there. And there's also a coin that goes unused along with the water that when collected does nothing special. It's just a coin with some water on it. Now if that last water tile not being animated was disappointing, then enjoy this animated sprite for an erupting volcano. It was likely going to be used with the volcano levels with the volcano backgrounds, of course. Speaking of backgrounds, we've also got some unused ones in the game too, like this red underground one that comes with its own unused tile set. And we've also got one that features stalagmites, along with this tile set of its own. And lastly, check out these unused NES backgrounds, each with the same unused tile set. Apparently there were going to be a lot more NES style bonus rooms like the one in 8-2, though sadly, most of these backgrounds were scrapped.
Now that we're finished talking about unused backgrounds and tiles, let's talk about actors. This could be anything from 3D enemies to just generic 2D objects, and there are some interesting ones that go completely unused. But there are also ones that are used in the game, but have scrapped unused settings with them that make them do weird things. So we'll start with that before we go directly to the ones that were completely scrapped.
First up, Chain Chomp. Poles. Turns out these poles have unused settings for appearing with no chain chomps, and even more than one. But the developers purposely had the system crash if that ever happened for some reason. Luckily, with a little bit of cheating, we can bypass that crash and let poles hold multiple chain chomps again. Though releasing them still causes the game to crash, which wasn't intentional, it's just really broken. Next are balloon boos, who I completely forgot existed until I wrote this part of the script. What makes them not normal boos is a little special feature that lets them grow when they're not being looked at. But there's also an unused setting for them that lets them function as a normal boo. That being said, the collision is off center, so it's not exactly functional. And then there's Dories, who has an unused setting for looking left, back, and directly at the player for some reason. I say that a lot. There's so many for some reason things in this game. There's also a bunch of actors that happen to have unused giant settings too, like wigglers, swoopers, and even trampolines, which will launch Mario way higher than usual with this setting on. Now that's all interesting and whatnot, but what about those completely scrapped actors I mentioned before? Well, we happen to have a few of those, like a giant fire-spitting piranha plane, which is actually a separate actor in the game, not a giant setting, and surprisingly, it functions perfectly. The next object is much stranger. It's a group of brick blocks, which at first glance may appear to be a normal group of blocks, just with an early sprite. But when stepped on, it becomes a springboard that can launch Mario just a little bit. But it can also be set to bounce around all the time, and that will launch Mario way higher in the air. This texture was meant as a placeholder though, sadly, since it's called Sampled Text 2 in the game, and it's actually just all the animation frames for the blocks from E3 2005, with the last couple not shown. Still, I like the jelly blocks, that's a really cool idea. This next unused actor is the exact opposite. If it actually was used, this would have been an awful gimmick to appear in levels. Do you see it? It's right here. How could you miss it? Oh yeah, that's right. It's completely invisible until you touch it. And if you do touch it, oops, you're dead because it's literally an invisible lava bubble.
Fun.
Whether it was meant to be invisible or just some sort of weird glitch, I'm not sure. I'm gonna guess the latter though, because creating an invisible lava bubble and then putting it in a Mario game, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a sin. See, I wasn't lying.
Okay, next up is unused levels that were left in the game. Now we have already seen unused level 5, that was the one from E3 with the desert and the sand and the hot. But we still got plenty more to see, so let's take a look at those, shall we?
The first unused area happens to be an early bonus room for World 1-A, and it's very similar to the second Star Coin area in the final level, just flipped vertically. The only tile set that fits with this room is the unused and used bonus room sets. Since this level is underwater though, it's likely that the original tile set was lost, and it was originally supposed to include an early underwater one. This next unused area is actually an entire level featuring power-ups. A lot of power-ups. Like almost every block in it has a power-up. This place feels a lot more like a power-up showcase than a level. Other than that, it's a pretty standard stage except for the flagpole at the end, which is never used in the game and no longer fits with the flag. So it's just kind of there. The next 3 unused stages don't have to worry about that though, since none of them have flagpoles. They're all scrapped versus stages for Mario and Luigi to battle on, complete with plenty of big star locations. Pretty much all of them have an issue with their sprites. This first unused versus stage, complete with a nice womp up at top. Dang, that's really hard to say. This unused versus stage with a womp up top can never show all of its sprites at once, since the original set has been lost, and any set that you put on it will only show a partial amount of them. It does include some interesting pieces in here though, like unused pillars, a giant springboard, and those scrap tiles of lava from earlier builds of the game. The scrap grassland stage also requires an early tile set to get to look properly, along with this other, more complex stage. It utilizes a special function that allows for multiple backgrounds and tile sets to be used on a single level. However, as you can guess, this was scrapped and can't be replicated in the final game. This stage was meant to have 3 different areas with doors connecting them. The first area was a normal grassland section, the second was an underground section with lots of coins, and the third utilized vines to cross a large pit. It's a really cool stage with a lot of interesting ideas that sadly can't be replicated in the final game. It was even going to feature a 2 chain chomp pole. Like frig, this would have been an amazing place to play at. It's such a shame it was scrapped.
Okay, there's one last thing I want to talk about in this video, and it has to do with the new Super Mario Bros. Manual. See, in some of the earliest versions of the game that were sold on store shelves, Nintendo just accidentally put an early screenshot of the game in the manual to show off the layout of the screen during overworld sections. But here's the thing that's cool. This is the only known screenshot we have of this build of the game, and it is very different than anything we've seen before. So frick, let's take a look.
So this is it. Surprisingly, the top screen is actually from the final game, but the bottom screen isn't. They don't match. It's very, very different. Especially with those world icons. Instead of them being flat little dioramas like the final game has them, the world icons are housed in little spheres. Sadly though, most of them are grayed out, so we can only really see what World 1's icon looked like completely. And the rest, well, they were lost to history.
That might seem like the end. Time to pack everything up, go home, cry a little bit. After all, we'll never know what those spherical icons looked like. And I'm not building this up. We actually really don't know what they look like. It's been lost. It's sad. Now hold on, before we all go into crisis mode, I've still got something to show you. It's not the early spherical world icons, but in the game's files, there are some other early spherical world icons from a different point in development when the game was going to use a very different looking world selection screen. And here they are.
Isn't this cute? These are all the worlds in the game, but made to look like little planets. World 1 went for a very realistic depiction of what a planet would look like, which is nice. World 2 is desert themed, so that lines up well. Same for World 3, it's still an ocean world, like the final game. World 4 though, that one's not quite right. The icon here is labeled as Ancient, showing off a big active volcano on it. But this stage in the final game is the Forest Poison world, with no volcanoes in sight. Though I guess technically it still has a dinosaur in it, so yeah, okay, I can see it as an ancient world. Next is World 5. In the final game, that's an ice world, and here we've got a lot of ice, so that seems about right. World 6 though, we're back to being completely different. This one isn't really even an icon for a world, it's just a metal ball. It's labeled as the Machine World, which is nothing like the final game. There, World 6 is the Mountain World, so yeah, completely different there. With World 7 though, it's just clouds, and the final is just clouds, so we're good here. Same goes for World 8. It's Lava World, and there's lava here. Nice. Though there is some strange smiling face on the top part, which, is that Bowser's castle? Is it a representation of a clown car? Though that doesn't appear in the game, so I'm not sure if it could be that. Honestly, I have no idea. It could just be an artist having fun. Now, I did mention that these icons were meant for a world selection screen that would have been completely different than what we have now. And here's what I meant by that. This is an early world select menu that features these spherical icons. And it's a pretty simple menu, and believe it or not, it actually functions correctly, taking you to the exact world it's supposed to. It also includes a few debug features too that allow you to zoom in and out and rotate everything. It is possible that this selection screen was simply meant for debugging purposes, but then again, why was so much care put into these icons and the little like rotation to have them just be removed because they were for debug only? Plus, not to mention, New Super Mario Bros. Wii did include something similar in their world selection screen with those rotating 3D models. So it is possible that this menu style was originally planned for New Super Mario Bros. On the DS. But in the end, just like those lovely spherical icons, it was all scrapped. Here's the part of the show where I give my thank yous, and holy frick, thank you Hiccup. Hiccup is an amazing person who just came over and was like, I'm gonna help you with your video. They and a bunch of other people are working on recreating the E3 demo of New Super Mario Bros. And it is so freaking cool. If you want to check out their Discord server, the link is in the description. And they're really looking for people who've played the E3 demo or have footage of the E3 demo or anything like that. So if you've got something, or if you're just interested in the project, head over to that server. Thank you all so much for watching. This was a very long wait, and I'm so sorry about that, but don't worry. The next one is going to be SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, and I know it's going to be freaking great. So thank you, patrons. Thank you, viewers. Thank you, everyone, for helping me through this hard time. And frick, that's all I got to say. Frick.